everyone, welcome to the chemistry channel. So today we're going to be talking about the basic ideas of the periodic table. We're not going to be getting too in-depth because we don't know enough yet, but we're just going to be talking about basic definitions, periods, groups, elements, etc. So it's going to be a short one, so let's get into it. So the periodic table is a table that organizes the elements based upon increasing atomic number. So if you were to draw the periodic table here, the atomic number would increase from left to right, and it would increase from top to bottom. Okay? So it is organized based upon this increasing atomic number. So let's get rid of this. Okay. So you may remember from my last video that elements in the periodic table are organized in this way. So they're displayed in these little boxes in the periodic table, and we're going to quickly go over what each of these things means. So the first thing is the big letter in the middle. This big letter in the middle is referred to as the element symbol. So the element symbol. So what is an element? An element is a substance which contains atoms with the same atomic number. So the letter that you see in the middle of each box is the element symbol. So in this case, we are talking about oxygen. All right. So the number at the top above the symbol is the atomic number, and the number at the bottom, the 16, is the atomic weight. So if you don't know what these two things are, I would please go back into my previous video. It's called Lecture 2, Atomic Mass, atomic number, and atomic weight, and I describe what these things are in great detail. So the atomic weight is always shown on the bottom, and the atomic number is usually shown at the top. So in the periodic table, there are periods and groups. So periods are referred to as the horizontal rows, and groups are the vertical columns. So down here, I have a crude picture of a periodic table, and I labeled the periods and the groups. So a period is a horizontal row. So here's a period, here's a period, and the periods are labeled with numbers. So the black numbers here correspond to the periods. So this is period 1, this one is period 2, and the periods extend all the way from left to right. So period 1 goes from this hydrogen to the helium here. Period 2 goes from these two blue boxes to these red boxes here. Period 3 goes from these two blue boxes to these boxes here. So the periods are the horizontal rows. And in the main table, there are 7 periods. Now these green numbers are the groups. So these are the green numbers. These green numbers correspond to the groups. So the groups are the vertical columns, which you see here. So there are many different groups, and they are labeled 1, 2, 3A, 4A, 5A, 6A, 7A, 8A, and then these ones are labeled, I think, 3B, 4B, 5B, etc. So, if you look at this periodic table, you'll see that I color-coded it. So, what do these different colors mean? Well, all the blue in this periodic table, all the part of the table that is shaded by the blue corresponds to metals. So metals make up most of the periodic table. The pink part, as we see here, corresponds to the non-metals. Okay. And if you look at the periodic table, you'll see that the nonmetals and the metals are divided by this white segment where I actually labeled what the elements are. This white segment is the semimetals, and we'll get into what those are in a little bit. So I actually label these because oftentimes in Gen Chem exams you're going to be asked what the semimetals are, so it's a good thing to memorize them. And you actually don't have to memorize them because I labeled here this little yellow staircase. So whenever you have a periodic table, you can label the staircase so you know where the semimetals are. And I think that's usually what most professors do. So let's label each different area of this periodic table. So let's label this first group. So this first group number 1 of the periodic table. Group number 1 of the periodic table, this blue shaded region, not the pink shaded region. So this blue region, so the metals in group number 1 are referred to as the alkali. Oops, let's get rid of that. It turned into a circle. So the alkali metals. So those are your group 1 metals. So that's going to contain your sodium, your potassium, and we're going to get more into the specific reactivity of these metals later. So right now we're just trying to show where certain things are. So the alkali metals will contain lithium, sodium, etc., potassium, rubidium, and cesium, and as well as francium. Okay, so those are the alkali metals. Now the group 2 metals are referred to as the alkali earth metals. So group 2 metals are the alkali earth metals. So that's going to contain your beryllium, magnesium, and everything down below. So this big group is actually it's a weird group of metals, as we'll learn about. This group is called the transition metals. And this is a really interesting group of metals that we will talk about later on. So this is going to contain iron, gold, silver, and copper. Okay, so these are all your transition metals here. Okay, so then we're going to go into our nonmetals here, this pink region. And this pink region also has specific classifications. So group 8 nonmetals are referred to as the noble gases. They are actually also called the inert gases. And that's because they are non-reactive, and we'll talk about why in a later video. So these are the noble gases. They're pretty much non-reactive. The second group that we're going to talk about is group 7A, and group 7A is referred to as the halides. So halides are group 7A. So this will contain your fluorine, you're going to have chlorine, and everything down below that in this group. So these are your halides. And then the last group that we're going to talk about for nonmetals, so we're only talking about the pink region, is the chalcogens. So the chalcogens are group 6A, and the chalcogens include one of the most important elements for us humans, oxygen, sulfur, and everything below that. And then the one below that is selenium. Okay, so those are the chalcogens. So those are the basic groups that you should know about and their names. Don't worry about memorizing them, because as we use them more and more in practice, you'll understand their names better. So right now I'm just trying to give you a basic overview of the periodic table. Oh yes, and the last bit is this bottom part. This is where elements get weird. So these two parts, this upper part is called the lanthanide. So lanthanide series. And then this second period is called the actinide series. And these are metals as well. Okay, so those are the major areas that you should be aware of. And as I said before, as you use these more and more, you're going to get pretty used to naming these different things. This is just to give you a basic organization. So as I said before, this region here, the semimetals, is important to know because it divides the transition metals from the metals from the non-metals. So I list them here for you. So the semimetals include boron, silicon, not silicon, so let's get this S out of here. Silicon, germanium, arsenic, antimony, and tellurium. So those are the semi-metals. And of course, you can draw it as like the step, as the staircase as we saw up there. Okay, so now that we know that there's the periodic table is made of metals, nonmetals, and semi-metals, let's just quickly talk about the different properties of each thing. Okay, so metals, they tend to be lustrous. So in other words, they're shiny, as you know. Think of a gold ring. They tend to be hard. They tend to be conductive. And they're usually malleable. And they're solid, except for mercury. So they tend to be lustrous, hard, conductive, malleable, and solid. And they also have a high boiling point. And a high melting point. Now there's other properties that you should know about, but we will leave those till we have a greater understanding of electrons. So we're going to get into that later. Nonmetals tend to be not lustrous. They tend to be insulators. They tend to be insulators. That means that they do not transmit charge very well. Now the nonmetals can be liquids and gases, so their phase can vary. And they also tend to have a lower boiling point and melting point. So nonmetals are basically the opposite of metals. So semimetals are the ones in between the metals and the nonmetals, and semimetals tend to have properties in between metals and nonmetals. So they're like the intermediates. Okay, and they're also sometimes called metalloids because of this, because they're the intermediate structures. They're the intermediate elements between nonmetals and metals, okay? So, and another thing to point out too is that they can also be solids, these nonmetals, but they tend to be brittle. So those are the major properties that you should know about for right now. And there's one more topic, one more tiny thing that you need to know, and that is that atoms in the same group have similar reactivities. So atoms in the same group have the same similar reactivities. So for example, if we go to our periodic table here, just let it clear up a bit. Well, the group 1 elements will all have similar reactivities. So for example, lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium, cesium, and francium will all have similar reactivities. All atoms within the same group have similar reactivities. And the reason for that, we're going to get more into this later, but the reason for this is because atoms in the same group have the same number of valence electrons. And valence electrons are the outer electrons, so the outer shell electrons. And the valence electrons are what determine reactivity. So that's all you need to know for right now, because we need to go over atomic structure before we get more into valence electrons. So this will all make more sense once we go through the more of the nitty-gritty about atomic structure, but this should suffice for right now. So this was just to introduce you to the periodic table, just give you an awareness of where different things are. So that concludes this video. There's going to be no practice problems for this video because it's mostly just a concept one. So thank you for watching. This concludes my periodic table series for now, and later on we'll go into more of the periodic properties and understanding why certain elements behave as they do. So thank you for watching, and see you next time.